Hi, this is Amreen. Before I begin the review, I'd like to admit that I was a bit skeptical about reading Henry James's The Portrait of a Lady. Call it my incuriosity or inclination toward contemporary writers. Either way, it's not justified because Henry James is a great American novelist, and he wrote this book from such a refreshing, liberating, and progressive woman perspective that it's hard to believe it was a product of the late 18th century. Now, I wouldn't call this a simple story with simple characters, nor do I want to call it complicated. Isabel Archer, the protagonist, comes to England where she meets her cousin and his friend, both of whom fall in love with her. And she rejects the offer of marriage from yet another man who pursues her from Boston. Even though the beginning of the novel revolves around this, more or less, the book feels like you're watching a classic play being enacted in a peculiarly English setting. Think of an old English mansion standing on a low hill above the river Thames. And this strikingly picturesque quality of every scene separates itself from the charm of the writing, which I feel is the most captivating aspect. Less than 50 pages in, and I was regretful for not picking up this book sooner. I found myself noting down plenty of little citations from the novel. She had a certain way of looking at life which he took as a personal offense, and her deepest enjoyment was to feel the continuity between the movements of her own soul and the agitations of the world. Things are always different than what they might be. If you wait for them to change, you will never do anything. So you get a gist of how momentous the unfolding of the story and the unraveling of the nature of the protagonist is. Then comes the character of Mr. Osman, who's closely associated with Isabel Archer, and in him and through him, I couldn't help but view the hypocrite, greedy, ignorant, cunning and monstrous aspect of mankind. But even then, Isabel's character doesn't get overshadowed in the novel, and I think that's what I like the best about this book, the fact that the author has so eloquently let Isabel and her transformation take center stage. To be honest, it was very easy for me to connect with the protagonist and her freedom. While reading, there were plenty of instances where I found myself gaping at the depth of this character, and even when I didn't agree with some of the decisions she makes. And not just Isabel Archer, you're likely to relate to most of the characters, because just like them, you too look upon the protagonist and size up her decisions. We may deny it, but passing judgments and contemplating the actions of the main character is what we all do as readers. So to sum it up, The Portrait of a Lady is an insightful, whimsical, and sometimes even a provocative read. It's the unapologetic story of a young woman who holds herself in high regard, and it's also a beautiful illustration of a writer who knows how to emphasize tragedy. This brings me to the end of the review. I hope you liked it, and if you haven't subscribed to Read a Day Club yet, then you know where the subscribe button is. I would really appreciate it if you also subscribe to our monthly newsletter, which is all about book recommendations and what we think about reading. All links are in the description box below. So anyway, thank you for watching.